Thank you for joining us for today's CQL hosted webinar, Is Your Business Fit for Shopify? My name is Betsy Petrovic. I'm the marketing manager at CQL. Over the past several years, we've seen a large amount of platform migrations as businesses are looking to expand their feature sets, rely less on their development resources, empower their marketing teams, and reduce their total cost of ownership. But with so many e-commerce platforms available, how do you know which is right for you? Well, today we're going to talk about Shopify. Shopify is a cloud-based hosted platform that is used by millions of businesses in 175 countries around the world, driving over 200 billion in sales. So today's webinar is going to focus on 4 things: why Shopify has become so popular, 2, the common misconceptions about Shopify, especially from our enterprise level clients, 3, how we address those misconceptions with our clients and help overcome any platform limitations. And lastly, how enterprise brands such as Escalade Sports and Stride Rite have successfully migrated over to Shopify Plus. So I'm excited today to introduce you to our speaker. His name is Ryan Donahue. Ryan is the Client Success Manager at CQL, where he leads our team of industry professionals in the design, development, and implementation of world-class e-commerce solutions. Ryan has spent the last 6 years working on e-commerce sites, from our re-platforms to integrations to marketing and growth, leading industry-leading platforms such as Salesforce, Shopify Plus, Magento, Work Area, and others. His clients that he works with are Elf Cosmetics, PetSmart, Escalade Sports, Stride Rite, Paula's Choice, Shoe Show Mega, and many more. So Ryan's experience from both the client side and the agency side provides a really unique perspective from our clients. So if you're like me, you're going to learn a lot from him today. Just as a housekeeping tip, during the webinar, I invite you to submit any questions through the Q&A, which Mary, our partner manager, and myself will be monitoring, and Ryan will answer them at the end. And feel free to challenge him. He absolutely loves these types of questions, and he is very knowledgeable about Shopify. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Ryan. Ryan, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Betsy. Yeah, challenging questions are always fun to answer on the fly. So thank you for that. And thank you for the kind introduction. Before we jump in, I'm going to just do the quick screen share. And if you just let me know, make sure that this is, you can see this okay.
You are good.
Awesome. So as Betsy already alluded to for the agenda, we're going to give just a quick little 1-2 minute overview of CQL, who we work with, and kind of where our perspective is rooted and where it comes from, a little bit of history about who we're working with. Then we'll dive into the why Shopify, as far as some of the industry trends we're seeing and why enterprise clients are making the switch to Shopify Plus. And we'll dive into on the misconceptions that are still in the market as it relates to Plus, and then how does CQL help address and overcome those misconceptions. And then finally, throughout, please submit questions that you have, and we will address those. We'll say about 15 minutes here at the end to walk through and address those. So a little bit about CQL. We've been around for 27 years, and we were really rooted in custom development. So 27 years ago, we started building SQL databases and completely custom development. We've written from scratch custom PIMs, custom e-commerce platforms, etc. And so a lot of our employees that have been here for 10 plus years are really their bread and butter is building things and thinking through things from a sort of a ground up approach, which lends itself really well to enterprise complexity. We're Michigan based, but remote employees all over the US. And the ticking total is in the hundreds of, we have 600 plus client site launches. So as an agency, where we've kind of, as we've transitioned all the way from custom into focusing on e-commerce for the last decade, we find that what really sets us apart from other agencies out there is we really are equipped for enterprise level commerce. So when you think about enterprise level and what that means, maybe 20 million upwards to 100 million in online revenue. But revenue is not the only factor, right? Complexity in general can make you an enterprise company if your revenues are above or below that range that I I mentioned. So we're doing a lot of really complicated integrations and complicated migrations. And a lot of our clients, and I need to check the actual numbers on this, but I believe we actually have more multi-brand clients than we have single brand clients. And so a lot of the ways that the lens for which we view the work that we do is actually in thinking through the complexities of multi-brand. So that could be international, could just be owning multiple brands. But it's definitely a perspective that we've really honed in on and I think is unique to CQL in that way. We have a great branding and content team, particularly around commerce and the content and brand that is needed for D2C brands. And we really pride ourselves on long-term client relationships. We've been working with some brands for like Wolverine Worldwide and all of the brands that they're owning and managing their D2C relationships. We've been working with them for over a decade. So very long-term, we're pretty sticky, as we like to say, and we're really here to find, we work with our clients on a long-term basis to help them build out their roadmaps long-term. Shopify for us is our fastest growing practice, and really how we view that platform is that it's really designed and built for brand and experience focused strategies. So really allowing you to focus on the front end experience and the shopper journey for your customers, and really making sure that your brand comes out and everything that you're doing at all of those touch points. One of the kind of terms that we've coined, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this in later slides, is this sort of mentality switch and this growth approach of switching from kind of the CTO to CMO approach, where the technology stack, Shopify Plus as a platform, is empowering marketers to grow the business. And it's less heavy on some of the more custom backend integrations and technical needs that you may have seen with more just other more legacy softwares that are in the industry. They have a really rapid feature release and roadmap cycle, which is really exciting as a user of the platform, and also as an agency partner of the platform. There's on a Slack channel, even this morning, we found they just released some new features that we have been wanting to use on our builds, and we're going to be able to use it now for a couple of the projects we're doing. So it's just really exciting to be working with a platform that has such rapid release cycles. And then just speed of market and scale. This is something that Shopify really brings to market in their marketing as well. And we've seen it, just the ease of use of the platform and the way it's structured, it really lends itself well to moving very quickly. And it also, though, can handle the scale that the enterprise merchants are looking for. So why Shopify? Talked about that a little bit on the previous slides, but I think there's kind of three pillars that I like to frame this conversation into. So they, in a lot of ways, have pioneered this sort of disrupting approach of this plug and play, ease of use, being able to get things up and running quickly. And they have a fantastic CMS. They have a great community. The app ecosystem is something that comes up often. There are a lot of really strategic partnerships in that ecosystem that allow you to get your full tech stack up and running very quickly. And we find that is truly one of the bread and butters of the platform, and it's what allows for the go-to-market strategies to happen so quickly. I've mentioned this already, the rapid release cycles, they have feature sets that are releasing all of the time, but they have their big Unite conference annually. There's a lot of hype, a lot of buzz, and that's where they make the larger, more impactful sort of roadmap type changes to their platform. And that's always a really exciting time for everyone in the community. Reducing the total cost of ownership and increasing our ROI. When you look at Shopify Plus and the why behind what merchants are kind of making that switch, is there's a lot of things obviously going on in the world economically, but just in general, like lowering total cost of ownership has become in the last few years a really important piece of the puzzle when you're looking at your e-commerce solution. And so Shopify lends itself extremely well to reducing your total cost of ownership, and it's very closely tied to the CTO CMO mindset, and kind of my third column here, which I'll go a little deeper on here in just a second. But Related to that, reduction in third-party support and maintenance as you start moving away from more back-end, more technical platforms and moving into this more plug-and-play model that Shopify has really created. Is it really allows to see a reduction in the support and maintenance that you'll rely on from an agency like CQL. In some cases, we've seen it as high as 50% type reductions, depending on business decisions made and what we're building. Internal support and maintenance as well. Your internal teams may find a lot of efficiencies in some of their day-to-day, which will make their jobs easier. And then really just being able to move fast and make changes quickly. So there are a lot of scenarios in working on Plus that differ, right? There's tons of e-commerce platforms out there. They're all structured differently. And there are a lot of scenarios where you can move very fast. Content management in particular, if you haven't seen it yet, I would definitely check out their page builder. It really puts your marketers, your site producers in a position where they can upload assets, create a landing page in, let's say 30 minutes. That's copy, assets, everything. It's really pretty amazing what you can do with their content management system in such a quick amount of time. And lastly, empowering marketers to enable growth. And again, what CQL would kind of call the CTO to CMO mindset. The ease of use of the third-party tools and lowering integration time is just hugely impactful. When you're able to do that, you can start reallocating funds from sort of that what we would call maybe the CTO budget of custom integrations. If you can take a $30,000 integration of, say, Apple Pay, and now you can do that in a checkbox, well, what are you going to do with that $30,000? Well, if you reinvest it and market it, you can turn that into, what, $30, $40, $50, $60,000 of actual revenue versus spending that on the actual technical aspect of getting that Apple Pay integration up and running. And so that's growth mindset, right? Reinvesting those funds, reallocating those funds to focus in the brand experience, your acquisition strategies. Maybe you want to test out a new sub brand and get that, speed to market, get that up and running. Maybe that's international expansion for your core brand. So there's really a lot that you can do with that, and we're really seeing a strong shift as it relates to that mentality and trying to focus on the growth and less time being spent on tech. In the upper right here, I just have this philosophy, and if you know anything about Shopify, you've probably seen it: make commerce better for everyone. And I think that when you look at these three pillars, the way that Shopify goes to market and the things that they're doing, they really are trying to make commerce better for everyone. That starts at the core of their platform. But it's also just kind of a methodology that they're using. If you really look at how they're structuring their platform, that they really stand behind that. So now let's dive into some of the misconceptions. There are, I'm kind of simplifying this down to phrases or quotes here on the left, and then we can kind of talk through some of the things that we see and how we feel that these are really strong misconceptions and sort of challenge the way that you look at Shopify if you are looking at it in a way that you think is not a good fit for your enterprise business. So firstly, we need an enterprise solution, and Shopify can't handle our scale. Shopify is for startups. The sort of fast and easy approach and the go-to-market strategy, a lot of things I described already, is scary for true enterprise businesses that have the enterprise tech stack. And I can definitely see how that's interpreted. If you're going to hear a pitch that you can get up and running in Shopify in 2 months for $20,000, and you're currently running, a tech stack that took, 2 years to build, there's obviously a very large delta there. And so it's really at the enterprise level, like that's not the case, right? We want to respect the complexity and the enterprise solution that you need. And you're probably looking at like a 4 to 6 month project in reality to pull off the complexity that you have. And complexity can be in the enterprise solution or scale can all be kind of defined, it's a client per client basis. So you may be a little lower, you may be a little higher on that, but I think that realistically, at least for what we're seeing, large enterprise brands, it's probably 4 to 6 month type initiative to pull off most of what you're wanting to be able to do. As far as scale and enterprise definitions, I have here good news. It can be done by multiple standards. So if you look at Shopify and some of the metrics that I've pulled here, right, almost 11,000 checkouts per minute across the platform. Oh, they have clients that are doing over $1 billion in revenue. So revenue and transaction are oftentimes where scale and startup terminology starts to break down, or how you may measure that. Yeah, they do have startups on their platform. They have startups that are doing $200 million online on their platform or more. And so if you look at the success that a lot of these merchants have had, I think it's definitely proven that it can handle scale. It's not just for startups. The flash sale brands also are maybe thought of smaller merchants, but they really push the bounds of transactional volume. So that's really when you start looking at, I came from the cosmetic or client side of the cosmetic industry. You look at some of those influencer-based drops that happen in the cosmetic space. You're moving, thousands of transactions and millions of dollars in a matter of minutes. And you look at, the shoe industry, and certain pair of Jordans drop, and you're looking at them being sold out in, seconds potentially. So you look at the transaction volumes or revenue across what the definition, regardless of your definition of enterprise, I think they've really proven that. And it's really worth you taking a look and looking into really what other brands are doing on the platform. Another one slightly related is just the complexity. Our business is too complex. Shopify can't handle, our customizations and our custom development. Certainly there are a lot of complex businesses out there. There are a lot of complexity involved in commerce, and it's a completely valid perspective to, again, respect the complexity that your business has. But just to speak to that a little bit, and where if you really dig into the weeds of like, what does that mean, and where are your customizations occurring? So my first label here is just options. So like when you're dealing with a lot of complexity, what are your options? Well, there are APIs available to handle custom development. If you really are truly that complex, you're probably leveraging them already today. Which leads to my second point, which is when you start looking at enterprise brands, like, and I have a graphic to kind of talk through this here in a second, but you may be using Boomi, Scribe, MuleSoft. You may have middleware and structure that's already in place in your ecosystem. You more than likely do. That's going to help support that complexity. And that, if anything, that's not working against Shopify. It's really just, that makes it a lot easier for you to make the move. You may have a PIM. There's going to be, just naturally with your current tech stack, you're naturally going to have all of these other systems in play that are used to APIs and having to talk through any given platform. And so that doesn't really set Shopify apart from any other platform they may be considering from where I'm sitting. They have third-party partners that do extend and customize the platform significantly. And the benefits, which I've talked about with that, is that you can leverage your tech stack. You can leverage your existing tech stack and actually migrate a lot quicker, because in a lot of cases, these enterprise level tools that are making up the totality of your stack, they understand the value of Shopify having over 2 million merchants, and they want to earn their business as well. And so a lot of these enterprise tools are actually creating these pre-built connectors to make it easier for brands to make the migration and the switch. The other piece is headless. Headless is obviously a big buzz and term in the industry that's floating around, and Shopify does have an answer for headless solutions. They have a starter hydrogen framework and oxygen that you can leverage if you decide that you want to take the headless approach for your business. Checkout is one that comes up sometimes around it being sort of standardized or not as flexible. So I just wanted to speak to that a little bit. Shopify's checkout is really good. Arguably maybe the best of any e-commerce platform out of the box as it stands. So some data around that. There's over 2 million merchants globally that are using that checkout and are making fairly minimal overall customizations to that. And what that provides for your actual end consumer who you are selling to as a merchant is that they've more than likely checked out with Shopify many times. And so there is a sense of familiarity there that helps conversion. The other part of that related to conversion is that Shopify at this point, with how popular their Shop Pay app is and that initiative as an accelerated payment method, is that they estimate roughly 30% of global shoppers are using that. And by using that, the data that they've used over the last few years across 2 million plus merchants is that they've seen average conversion rates when using Shop Pay of 4% increases on desktop and 11% on mobile. And so in the conversations that we're having, even at the enterprise level, questioning why you would work against metrics like that is it's a real conversation. We've personally, with clients we've had, have seen the conversion rate increases that can happen. We actually have on other platforms, there was an instance where we did conversion rate optimization on the checkout flow. And by making it actually the other platforms checkout more like Shopify's, we increased their conversion. So there's a lot to be said about the structure and some of the way that Shopify has structured their platform, and in checkout in particular, how they built that and how they have optimized that. It's good for your business. Whether you're 5 million or 50 million, 500 million, it's good for conversion. It's good for your business. If you do want to push the bounds, though, there are app extensions. I believe it was last year that they came out with this. They have 4 different locations plus post-purchase modifications that can happen. And they've allowed now for apps, third-party app extensions, to actually interface with that checkout so that you can start doing more advanced customizations to that flow. And basically what it does from a 4-location standpoint is they're helping continue to provide that structure to have consistent insertion points, but still keeping their holistic flow that they've optimized and proven out. There is a checkout.liquid modifications that can occur on Plus if you really want to go that route. And then lastly, this is something that we pride ourselves at CQL as working with our enterprise merchants that are validating Shopify Plus and determining if it's a good fit and looking to make that switch, is that really this is the opportunity to simplify your business, and save time and money, and really looking at leveraging platform where you can and reevaluating your customizations that you have. I mean, are they really there because they're drivers of your business, or are they there because 2 VPs of e-commerce ago, you had it and it's just like tech debt or things that have lingered over years and things that you don't actually use day to day. Those customizations, custom development, and the more complexity that's built in the business, there are long-term and short-term implications and costs, ongoing support of having those. And so we do from a change management standpoint, and when making the decision of, are you a good fit for your Plus business, it's really a good time to take a step back and look for areas where you can customize and make strategic decisions around where you're going to have complexity and where maybe it would be a lot smarter for a holistic approach to actually simplify some things. The other thing too that we see with more multi-brand solutions is that the largest platforms receive the most amount of attention, or the largest brand receives the most amount of attention. So if you're one of the smaller brands, or you as a VP of e-com, you want to try to spin up an international store or some of these other initiatives to help grow the business, by taking a Shopify Plus approach, it can give you that speed to market and allow that team to have flexibility that's kind of decoupled from some of those highly, developer centric, where they kind of become the bottleneck to allow you to move the ball forwards for those brands. All right, so now robust features, Shopify can't be customized, or Shopify requires a lot of apps. So I've already mentioned apps and third-party partners a few times. And yes, their apps are something that app is the term that Shopify uses for third-party partners connecting to their platform. Really, the app itself. So let's talk about the definition of an app. So Shopify calls it an app. Other platforms may call it an extension or a cartridge. There's a lot of different names for it, but essentially you're creating an opportunity for a third-party platform to do what they do best. And as a merchant, allow that to happen very easily, very quickly. Again, tying it back to accelerated timelines and making commerce better for everyone. So when you start looking at your holistic feature set and your tech stack and what tools you have, what I would advise you to do, as you're looking at Shopify Plus and before writing it off is like, what is actually required and what is actually used? Defining your feature set is extremely important. An RFP process is oftentimes the way people go about this. I've probably seen 20 different templates with different scoring systems and how they all work. And I think that if you're going to create a checklist of 1,000 different things you want, and 200 of those may not even be things that e-commerce platforms should be doing for your business, right? Like brands like a Shopify Plus might get written off very, very quickly, or even other platforms in the industry, because you're looking at check boxes. You're not looking at what's driving your revenue. Are there things that you can measure back to KPIs versus just a subjective need for your business? And really, again, focusing on what your team has the capacity to leverage and use day to day, not just what platform can do all of the things, because I've seen it time and time again, your team's not actually going to use all of the things. So really, like, what is going to move the needle, and what's going to work best for some of the intangibles, which is the team structure that you have, the way you work, and what your roadmap is moving forward. So getting back to the apps a bit here, apps can solve a lot of the problems to platform functionality. This is not really specific to Shopify, though. This is specific to a lot of platforms. That's why apps, extension cartridges, that's why these things exist. Search and merchandising, for example, it's almost guaranteed on a Shopify Plus replatform that if you're quote unquote at true enterprise, you're going to use a third-party search and merch solution for that, such as SearchSpring. SearchSpring has a fantastic solution. The benefits of going with something like a SearchSpring, they're a search and merch company. Personalization, even, they focus on that 24/7, 365. That's what they're best at. You also, not more than likely, there are many different scenarios, even on other platforms, where this is a common occurrence that you're not using native search and merch. You're using third-party search because you want to leverage the additional functionality, like something like a SearchSpring can provide you. Algolia, others, right? There's an industry that's designed. There's a ton of tools out there that specialize and focus on that can go above and beyond what the e-com platform can do. There's a lot of different categories for that too, right? Personalization, A/B testing, and CRO type tools, email marketing, accelerated payment methods like Apple Pay, Afterpay, Amazon, etc. Like, those are all things that, from a terminology of app, in Shopify, yeah, you might have an app for those things, but it's not really any different than the way we see the structures and a lot of other platforms, as far as allowing you to pre-build. The difference is the terminology and potentially the ease of use. So I'm going to have a couple of examples just to get super specific with this, is that Shopify has a strategic partnership with Global-e, cross-border internationalization tool, right? And they have some big claims around. So they have a very strategic partnership. It's an exclusive partnership, and it's pretty new, but they're able to get you live in about 2 weeks, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on your complexities. But they have a really accelerated timeline to get you up and running because of the fact that they've worked through a lot of those complexities. And that's a strategic partnership that they built together, and making sure the solution is going to work the way it should work. So on other platforms, and we've witnessed, because we've implemented this on other platforms, take 3 months to get that same feature set done. I'll hammer on Apple Pay again, which I brought up, right? Apple Pay with some testing and checking a box on your gateway and payment processor in Shopify. It's 2 hours. We've implemented that on other platforms. That's, this extension or cartridge or app model where there's much more development required, dev heavy. And we've seen that take 3 months. Klaviyo, email, they are an email marketing and service provider. In roughly 4 hours, you can add their app, which is going to provide the integration from Shopify to Klaviyo, and it's going to handle your order data and product data feeds automatically because they've built a connector and they have those things working for you. And you're now ready to start focusing on the marketing, which is campaign and template setup. So whether it's Klaviyo, Bluecore, ListTrack, Insert, other, right? These ESPs have built these things in a way that makes it easier for you to get into their platforms and use them quicker and less time on the actual development hours it takes to actually make these systems talk. So there's actually a lot of power and a lot of value in this approach. Yes, there are, and this is where the misconception comes from, for smaller brands, they may have 50 apps that they're doing because they don't have development and support teams to help them. They're trying to do things in-house and they're adding a lot of functionality that way. But if you architect and plan things out correctly, there's really very few apps that you're adding that are related to, I'd say, core Shopify functionality versus leaning on your tech ecosystem of these core platforms that you need to run your business, like search, personalization, email marketing, etc. So I've alluded to this a couple times already. And so this is just an example tech ecosystem map that I came up with just to make a point. So Shopify being the black central piece of this, you have a lot of the tools I've talked about with your email marketing, your live chat, your SMS, loyalty programs, etc. Those were kind of, regardless of platform, are going to be outside of your core e-commerce platform. If you look at your tech stack today as sort of the before state, and you looked at what the tech ecosystem map would look like for an enterprise solution, moving to Shopify, the ecosystem map is actually fairly similar. We're starting to notice this across our more complex builds that we're doing because of the fact in the bottom and sort of right, you're seeing that there's a middleware and ERP, right, already in place. On the right, we have mobile apps or an AWS instance where you have a custom React app to handle, let's say, warranty claims, really advanced warranty claims, or really advanced product customizer. Like those are already living there more than likely on the complexities that you've built. And you're owning outside the e-commerce platform today. And those things continue to be true on Shopify Plus tomorrow. And so just to kind of show a visual representation and some of the things that we're seeing at the enterprise level is like, are you a fit? I think it's definitely worth the exercise to really sit down and look at the map and how it would differ if you didn't decide to proceed and make a shift to Shopify Plus, because I think you might be surprised by how similar it actually is at the end of the day. 100 variant limit, it's one of those sort of easy ones that comes up to solve. That rarely do you have to ever be concerned about this. There are multiple ways to solve it. And I'm not going to go too technical on this one, but there's kind of 3 different scenarios depending on your needs that we've found where clients are actually exceeding the 100 variant. So one of them is if they're trying to customize. Are you trying to customize product? So it's engraving, uploading an image to, say, jewelry like a locket, or just a configurable product that you have to make 20 selections before you actually see a price. And you can either do a completely custom app to manage that, or use a third-party platform, customizer, a platform that's literally designed to handle custom product. Again, to the previous slide, that is something that is going to be the same on any platform you're going with. Those are the approaches that those get handled. Customizers aren't built native into e-commerce platform, and they really shouldn't be. From a normal variation standpoint, so you have 3 options, say size, color, and width. We have solved this and proven this out, where there is the ability to leverage meta fields and making product associations and then there's some manipulation on the front end where you're serving up one PDP as you want for the shopping and buying experience. All the normal benefits of a single PDP for shoppers, as well as SEO, Google, Bing, etc. And you're achieving essentially over 100 variants for a single product using, 1, 2, 3 different options. And you're just using like 2 meta fields and some associations and some front-end logic to achieve that. Lastly is I'm calling product splitting, and there's kind of 2 different ways to describe this. So let's say you had size and color, and there's some sort of upsell component. So that is a scenario where the third option, so you choose your size, you choose a color, and then the third option there doesn't even need to be an option for the product. It could be an upsell, such as a checkbox. On the front end, you can style it to match, to make it look like an option, or you can make it look like an upsell. But that can using a line item property for that core product. It's a way to circumvent the 100 variant limit, and also you're providing, you can manipulate the UI however you want. Another way is sort of a natural split for the shopping experience. So there may be a product that needs to have its own unique PDPs. An example from the cosmetic industry is like an eyeshadow. You may have 200 colors of a single pan eyeshadow. And in that case, it actually makes sense. So on the PDP and the buy stack, you want to display all 200 colors of what eyeshadow you're going to pick. However, the ingredient decks and the formulas for all of those are different. And so it actually makes a ton of sense to split those PDPs, because you want, for SEO purposes, the black eyeshadow to have its own, the red eyeshadow to have its own PDP. So the reviews are really tied to how that red eyeshadow, performed versus, say, a competitor's red eyeshadow. Same for the black. So that's more of a, you're catering the shopping experience in a way that even though you have more than 100 variants, it actually doesn't make any sense from a data modeling standpoint to build that way in the platform. So it actually doesn't become an issue for that business. So, all right, just a quick time check here. I want to make sure that we have enough time for your Q&A here. So overcoming the misconceptions. I've talked about this a lot. So pivot your thinking when you're looking at e-commerce platforms. Shopify Plus deserves a seat at the table for enterprise, and think about this growth. Think about growth mindset and embrace making commerce easier, and really focusing on empowering marketers and growth. You need that technical foundation, but the goal is the technical foundation is supposed to support the growth and sales of the business. Remember, you're not the first one to do this. There are a lot of brands that are making this shift right now, and they're solving a lot of the complexities and thinking through a lot of the things that you're also thinking through, which is related to the last point of trusting a partner, trusting Shopify through the initial exploratory phase. That these things have been solved, and they can give a lot of advice on whether you are a good fit or not. As you get more serious, jumping into discovery and challenging the status quo for your business. So enterprise, not downplaying complexity here. Enterprise means planning and architecting correctly for that complexity, and making sure that along the way, challenging the status quo of simplifying your business. So don't just take all the complexity you have over years and years. Take a step back and make sure that you're actually migrating the complexity that makes sense for the business, not just increasing timelines and budgets because it's always been done that way. Just a couple quick examples, and we'll get into the Q&A here. For Stride Rite, this was a brand that had some of the challenges that I've talked about and some of the misconceptions. 100 variant limit specifically. Some of their shoes have 1,200 to 1,400, I think, variations. They have, 25 colors with 20 sizes, etc., 3 widths. So it can get very complex from a variant standpoint, but they have successfully migrated. It was roughly a 5-month project, and we actually migrated PIMs at the same time. So they've been very happy. They've seen conversion rate increases for their site and making that move. We do have a webinar that will be coming out Q3 this year is what we're estimating. But if you follow us on LinkedIn, we'll have an announcement. We'll actually be kind of going through the decision-making process, as well as kind of some of the approaches we took on the build and the success that they've had in their migration to Plus. They are a business that when we looked at the complexity, even 2 years ago, we were in a roadmap planning meeting, and I actually specifically said with the complexity that they have today, Shopify would not be a good fit. You fast forward, a year and a half later, the next roadmap planning roadmap planning meeting, we had kind of completely flipped our perspective and said, based on what's happened over the last year, not only from Shopify's product roadmap and all this rapid development they're doing and releasing new features, but also just knowing that their goals as a business was to shift more CMO and growth, and they were trying to reduce backend development and just overall development costs. There was a lot of alignment in making that happen, and they had a very successful launch. Escalade Sports is another one. We're going to have a webinar and dive even deeper on this, June 16th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard. So again, follow us on LinkedIn if you want to learn more about this. But they have, I think, 11 brands in total now that are on Shopify Plus. They had a lot of different scenarios. They had some headless and custom type e-commerce sites in play. They had some sites that had nothing. They had a failed Magento build in the mix there, and actually had no site for a while. And so we established a framework that could be repeated across all of those sites. And again, today I think they have 11 total that are live, and they have a custom site in-house AS400 ERP that was, at the start of the conversation, was the absolute, could not be changed. And so we leverage Shopify APIs. We have a custom middleware for inventory, order, and pricing feeds that allow everything to work as expected, and for the most part retain their day-to-day operations from an ERP complexity standpoint, but empowering their marketers to have speed to market when it comes to managing landing pages, managing content, and marketing strategies. They've recently started using native connectors for Instagram, Facebook selling to help expand and grow their sales channels as well. And then lastly, Hayworth, billion-dollar company with B2B and B2C both being areas of growth and expansion for them. They have, with COVID, there was a desire and need to go more direct to consumer, and also helping to simplify and beef up their B2B options for customizing a chair. I think there was over 1 million permutations that could be achieved on their product. So a lot of work went into thinking through the user journey, making sure that 1 million options could be shoppable in a way that made sense for the end consumer to help go direct to consumer. SAP was in play. So again, a lot of complexity, billion-dollar entity on Shopify Plus. So with that, I think we have left enough time for Q&A. And Betsy and Mary, I guess, hit me with questions.
All right. So just a reminder, if you have questions for Ryan, please submit them through the Q&A box. And I'm going to actually kick it off here. So Ryan, I think both of you and I come from the client side. So one of the questions I have is a lot of clients have been told that their platform currently empowers marketing and you really don't need a lot of dev, and you end up on the marketing team realizing that that's not necessarily the case. Can you talk a little bit about the dev that's required when you're on Shopify? There's a lot of plug and play apps. Kind of where does dev come into that solution?
Sure. So I'd say when you're getting started, what we find is there is a good amount of backend development that will occur. Again, talking about middleware, talking about ERP to establish the foundation. And most of that is downstream, right? So backend development is required, API driven, orders or pricing feeds, product feeds, etc. Some of that's upstream and downstream. I realize as I'm saying that, but backend initially there. Once that's established and set up, it's fairly light. Those things tend to run. You may have some light ongoing maintenance. There may be API updates or changes, so things that you want to keep going. But as far as like full-time employee managing that, like that's not. It's much more a lighter lift. From a front end perspective and the marketers and where they're actually interacting with the customers, I think it just depends on how aggressive you want to be with change, right? So from a theming structure, content management structure, if you're smart up front and you're building a lot of different flexible content sections, is what they're called in Shopify. So you add the image, add the title, make it an H1 or make it an H2, right? Depending on the flexibility that you're giving your marketers, when you build those sections out, it could be very light. If you want to, come up with a new landing page and you want it to look different than everything else on your site, then yeah, it may require, you have some front end dev staff to help build out those content sections and blocks so that you're able to go in without writing code to create and manage those for that new fancy landing page that you want to make. But as a general rule, I would say it's significantly less.
Okay. Do you recommend, if you're on Shopify, that there is some kind of dev support agreement that you continue on to have that level of support?
Yeah, certainly at the enterprise level. If you're questioning, are you a good fit? Most of the times that question is coming from the most complex of scenarios. And so it also just depends on what does your team structure look like? Like, do you already have some back-end dev and front-end devs on staff? Because that may shift. It probably will shift and should shift as you make that move. Like you probably aren't, if you have 3 back-end devs managing things today, a reduction to one is probably likely, depending on what kind of complexity we're talking about. On the front end side of things, I can tell you that our devs love working on the platform, and like I said, we've seen scenarios where you can do things 50% faster. Even from a front end dev standpoint of getting those types of new landing pages up and running in a repeatable model too. So you don't have to go back to the dev every time. Once that super custom landing page is built, and you have those sections and configurations there, if you're happy with those, you don't need to reach out to the dev team again. You can just keep using those for different landing pages and mix and match those creations across the site.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about apps. So say I had the idea of adding just another payment option, like you mentioned, Apple Pay or Shopify Pay. If I wanted to add those on, talk to me about the simplicity of that. From a marketer standpoint, could I go in and just click a button and it just appears inside the checkout?
Yes and no. So yes, as a marketer, if you have access, can you check the box in the platform? Yes, you can. Right? Apple Pay or an Afterpay, let's say, Amazon Pay, right? You can add those. Usually where the time to market slows down on that isn't the platform capabilities. It's more just the business and finance side of things. So you've got to go talk to finance about, right? Hey, we're adding Amazon Pay. What's our MEI? Like, what's our company LLC? Like, there's like legalities, right, with payment methods that have to be established. So you bring the appropriate people in and make sure you guys are set up with those merchant accounts with Amazon or Apple, what have you. But the actual execution of that is very straightforward.
Okay, another question. If a client comes to you with requirements and they have a platform in mind, maybe it's not even Shopify, how do you kind of get people to take a step back? Stride Rite's probably a great example from the example you gave. How do you take a step back and have them consider Shopify versus some of the other platforms that they might be considering?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, our job is to find the right solution, right, for our clients. It's not about selling Shopify as a platform. So if you come to us and you already are sold internally, and that could be because your CEO has worked on, let's say, BigCommerce before, and he has a partnership there, he wants to be on BigCommerce. Like, it's our job isn't to fight you on that and move you to Shopify or Commerce Cloud or Magento, right? It's to make sure that it's going to work for your business. And in that instance, BigCommerce may be fine and it will work for your business. And so proceed with BigCommerce. It's really not our job to like sell platform. It's about making sure it's going to be the right fit for your business. That's not to say that we don't at least broach the conversation. If you're going to go down a path, let's say, let's flip the table a little bit. If you're going to go down the path of Shopify, and you're saying you have all this complexity, and we go through all of that, there may be some change management things that we need to consider. And we're going to bring that up to you that, hey, if you go this way, and this might be, a big change for your business. And it's ultimately up to the client to decide we're okay with that or no, we're not. And if you're not, then let's talk about which other platform might be a better fit that wouldn't have that scenario in play. Does that provide enough clarity on that?
Absolutely. So do you typically, I guess, find that then from, I guess, as part of the discovery process when you're building out the ecosystem maps, that kind of could come up as far as, hey, you could do this on Shopify? Is it during the like business requirements?
It just depends on what path we're taking from a platform selection process. So if we're doing a holistic platform evaluation, right, that's a paid engagement where you're actually going to go through and analyze very deeply, probably 2 or 3 different platforms, and we're going to turn over every rock, right? And that's probably like a 4 to 6 week process. And it's very catered to your businesses, your needs, your team size, etc. If it's more, like, hey, we want to get going like as soon as possible. Is this going to work? Like, then you start to end up dealing with spreadsheets of sort of feature requirements that feel like RFPs, and you're reading through that and you're looking for red flags, and you kind of bring those up to the client through that process. So every client has a different process of, if they want it tomorrow, right? Are they being more strategic? Like, hey, we're going to do this next year, but we're doing planning now. So depending on timelines, and kind of where their headspace is, it just affects on how we can go through that and what level of advice and opinion we can provide them.
Cool. All right, I think we have time for one last question. This one talks about timeline. So Shopify and CQL, we talk about the kind of the fast speed to market on Shopify Plus. What would you say is a realistic timeline for a typical launch? For example, like how did it go on Stride Rite and Escalade, and some of the examples that you gave us?
Sure. I would say that we see 3 to 6 months is probably the range that I would give that most of the builds we've done fall within. I would say, again, we've been hitting really hard like enterprise, and I think enterprise is with more complexity is probably on 5 6. It's like on the higher end of that. But with that said, if you're a big brand and you're trying to do something like an international expansion or, a test market, like things like that on the platform, like you could definitely be on the low end of that. I think Heinz Ketchup is like, well, we didn't work with Heinz, but that's a really good example where they did it in like, I think a few weeks to go D2C for Heinz. So like there's outliers there, but for what we're working with, the clients that we work with, 3 to 6 months, I would say, and more complex, you're probably on the 5 and 6 month side of that.
Awesome. All right, I think that's about all the time we've got for today. So on behalf of CQL, we just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. And a special thanks, Ryan, for sharing your experience on Shopify. Next month on June 16th, just as a reminder, we're actually going to have Escalade Sports. Their e-commerce manager, Emily, will join us along with Shopify Plus and CQL. And you'll learn how Escalade took those 11 brands on separate platforms and unified them onto Shopify Plus. They actually grew their revenue 139% and tripled the amount of checkouts. So you'll get to learn more in that webinar. The link is included. I'll throw it here in the chat, and we invite you to sign up as well as follow us on social media for more details. So I'll include that here for you guys. And just again, thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.